collapse and comeback. At 3 in the morning on the 2nd of May, 2026, the bright yellow plane stopped. Spirit Airlines, the cheapest way to fly in America for almost 20 years, canceled every flight at once and began shutting down for good. How does the airline that made flying cheap run completely out of runway? For a generation of travelers, Spirit was the price you couldn't argue with. A ticket could cost less than the taxi to the airport. The catch was everything else. A bag, a seat you actually chose, even a cup of water carried a fee. People loved to hate it, the jokes, the arguments at the gate, but they kept booking because nothing else was that cheap. At its peak, Spirit flew around 220 aircraft to nearly 90 cities. It was loud, yellow, and impossible to ignore. And then, in the space of about 18 months, it fell apart. Spirit didn't begin in the sky. Its roots trace back to a 1960s trucking company in Michigan, which drifted into flying holidaymakers on charter trips in the 1980s. In the 1990s, it renamed itself Spirit Airlines and moved to Florida, flying ordinary scheduled routes like everyone else. For years, it was just another small carrier competing on the same terms as the giants and losing. The idea that would make it famous and eventually break it hadn't arrived yet. It took a new boss and a simple, ruthless question. What if the ticket only paid for the seat and nothing more? That boss was Ben Baldanza, and in 2007 he did something no American airline had dared. He took the price of a ticket apart. Copying the low-cost playbook Ryanair had proven in Europe, Spirit made the base fare shockingly cheap, then charged separately for everything a traveler used to get for free. That same year, it became the first U.S. airline to charge for a checked bag. A fee for choosing your seat followed in 2008. Bit by bit, water, snacks, and even a boarding pass printed at the airport became extras. The airfare stopped being the price of flying. It became bait. The maths behind it was clever. A rock-bottom fare filled every seat, and a full plane is a cheap plane to run per passenger. The profit didn't come from the ticket, it came from the pile of fees stacked on top. Pack the cabin tight, fly the plane hard, keep costs lower than anyone, and let the add-ons do the earning. For a while it worked beautifully. Spirit grew fast. Other airlines quietly copied the fees, and the ultra-low-cost model it pioneered became the template budget flying still runs on today. Being the cheapest was also armor. When deregulation reshaped American flying, when 9/11 emptied the skies, when the 2008 crash and then COVID grounded the world, travelers with no money to spare still needed the cheapest seat, and that was Spirit. In 2020, as the pandemic gutted the industry, budget carriers were hit hard, but the low-cost model was supposed to be the survivor. Lean, cheap, hard to kill. Spirit came through each storm still flying. Its problem in the end wouldn't be a disaster from outside. It would be a door that quietly closed. By the early 2020s, the low-cost airlines wanted to join forces. In 2022, Spirit agreed to merge with Frontier, another budget carrier, until a bigger airline, JetBlue, gate-crashed with a richer offer. JetBlue eventually won a deal to buy Spirit for about $3.8 billion. For Spirit, this was the exit. Its costs were creeping up, low fares were getting harder to sustain, and a merger meant scale, cash, and a partner to lean on. On paper, being bought by JetBlue was the lifeline that would carry Spirit safely into the next decade. It just needed a court to allow it. In January 2024, it didn't. A federal judge, William Young, blocked the JetBlue takeover on antitrust grounds. The rules meant to stop one company killing competition. His reasoning had a bitter twist. JetBlue would have converted Spirit's packed, cheap cabins into its own pricier seats, and erasing Spirit would hurt exactly the budget travelers who depended on it. In other words, the deal was blocked to protect low fares. Weeks later, JetBlue and Spirit called the merger off for good, and JetBlue paid a $69 million breakup fee. The lifeline was gone. Now Spirit had to survive on its own, and its own was getting weaker. Alone, the cracks widened fast. Fares stayed stubbornly soft as bigger airlines flooded Spirit's cheap routes with their own bare-bones tickets, copying the very idea Spirit invented. Costs, meanwhile, refused to fall. On top of that, a recall of the Pratt & Whitney engines on its newest Airbus jets grounded dozens of Spirit planes, aircraft it was paying for but could not fly. An airline earns money only when its planes are in the air. Spirits were increasingly parked. Every month the company was flying more seats for less money, and the gap between what it earned and what it owed kept getting wider. The numbers tell the story plainly. Spirit lost money year after year, roughly $473 million in 2021, $554 million in 2022, $448 million in 2023, and then the floor gave way. In 2024, the loss ballooned to about $2 billion in a single year, more than the 3 years before it combined. This was no longer a rough patch to ride out. A company bleeding at that speed has a countdown running, and Spirits had started. In November 2024, Spirit did what struggling companies do to buy time. It filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, a legal timeout that lets a business freeze its debts and try to reorganize while still operating. Its planes kept flying. Passengers barely noticed. The plan was to shed debt, raise fresh cash, and come out leaner. In March 2025, Spirit emerged from that first bankruptcy, officially restructured and on paper, given a clean second chance. The trouble was that the timeout had fixed the balance sheet without fixing the business. The money was still going out faster than it came in. Then came the twist almost no major airline had pulled off. Just 5 months after walking out of bankruptcy, on the 29th of August 2025, Spirit filed for Chapter 11 all over again. Lawyers have a grim nickname for a company that goes bankrupt, recovers, and goes bankrupt again so quickly. A Chapter 22. The first filing had cut the debt but left the real problem untouched: fares too low, costs too high, planes too often on the ground. Spirit's own chief executive admitted much more work was needed to survive. This time, the clean second chance would not come. The runway was almost gone. The end came quickly. Early in 2026, Spirit reached yet another rescue deal to climb out of its second bankruptcy. And then a fresh spike in jet fuel prices tore it apart, driving up the one cost an airline can never escape. Spirit had reportedly asked Washington for emergency help, a rescue of around $500 million, but no deal came together. Out of cash, out of options, and out of time, the company gave up on reorganizing and switched to winding down completely. In the small hours of the 2nd of May, 2026, after more than 3 decades, the yellow plane stopped, and tens of thousands of booked passengers woke up grounded. So what does Spirit leave behind? Its planes and gates were carved up and sold to rivals, and the cheapest seats in America simply vanished. On some routes, fares were expected to rise once the discounter was gone, but its real legacy is already everywhere. Almost every airline now charges for bags and seats because Spirit proved people would pay. The ultra-low-cost model didn't die with Spirit. It won so completely that everyone copied it. The lesson is a hard one. Being the cheapest built an airline. And when the costs finally caught up, being the cheapest left nothing in reserve to survive. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. New collapses and comebacks land 3 times a week.